So, this is what the line looked like on November 12th of 1904. This is the latest opening, 157. So, this is what we had at this point. Well, ignore the buildings, I just put them there for fashion, but... And on November 23rd, we got this. Something called the Lenox Ave line. And it was a connection that started from 96th Street and would go to 110th Street, 116, 25, 135, and 145. And this is, well, at this point, this was known as the Lenox Terminal Yard. This would eventually become 148th Street. So, when the line opened, trains would start at City Hall. They would take a really long trip down to the west side, and they would terminate at 96th Street. Express trains would start at Brooklyn Bridge, which is here, and they would go to streets on 14th Street, Grand Central, 72nd Street, 96th Street, and they would take all the rest of the route to 145 and eventually 157, which I will put this SIM card here, ejector, for you guys to see. This is 157th Street right here. This is the terminal from November 12th, 1904 on this line to around January of 1906. But we got something called the Lenox Avenue line. Lenox Avenue was an extension for express trains. So instead of terminating a local train serving 96th Street, they would go to 157, hence the SIM card, and they would take the express trains, which would either go to White Plains, or what I know as Lenox is 145. White Plains was that they would take the trains from 135 to 149 Grand Concourse and something that was called East 180th Street, which I've heard is demolished. Which is interesting, considering that there would also be trains down here too that they were building. That eventually, so I will talk about the Brooklyn section, the preview of the Brooklyn section of this down section later, but these stations that are going to be over here played a very important role in the importance of the express subway lines and eventually the H system that was in 1918. So that's kind of why Brooklyn Bridge is a really important station, because it was a gateway between the newer stuff from 1905 from down here all the way to something that wasn't either known as White Plains or Lenox Avenue. While the local trains terminated at 157th Street, and that would remain until 1906. It's interesting to see how the entire line became a huge detriment to the history of the subway. It became more interesting as things got better, as trains got bigger and faster, and as also as things started to expand more to a clearance of extension. Which is why it's very important to realize that this entire line influenced Lenox Avenue immediately after opening, even though it was being built around the same time. I like the idea of it, and it looks pretty nice to look at, you know, to see and be crazy about it. Although we don't really see City Hall, West Street, 18th Street, 91st Street in service anymore, it's interesting to see, now that we got a new section of subway stations for people to take, it took you to Harlem, and that's what Harlem was. Harlem was one of the most important pieces in the subway line, because Harlem is one of the biggest important factors that gave the station to its own point. So, that's will be the end of the video for now. It's interesting now that we're trying to get the subway down together. Another piece of the puzzle was starting to become something like this. Well, Well, partially, but you guys get the point. So, we will start with something that is known as the Lenox Avenue line, well, White Plains Road line, which leaves 135th Street, and it will take you down to something that we know as the Bronx. So, we're going to be expanding into the Bronx officially, with the extension all the way up to East 180th. That's the end of this, I say.